I'm a farmer, born and raised amid the soil, sweat, and blazing sun. My land isn't merely a home, it's my heritage. Sadly, it sits far too close to a property now controlled by an overbearing HOA known as Shadow Creek. I don't dislike the residents there. A few are genuinely pleasant, and we've enjoyed cold beers together along the fence with plenty of good-natured jokes. Yet every calm community eventually develops a problem, and in this case, hers is the name Grace. She serves as HOA president, always armed with her clipboard, preaching rules with the enthusiasm of a zealot and a demeanor as dull as old toast. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour day moving feed, repairing my tractor, and tracking down an escaped goat when I turned into my gravel driveway and spotted her. Grace was positioned at my gate as if she owned the very ground under her feet. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. Be sure to like and subscribe for the best HOA drama around. At first, I assumed she might have gotten lost, or was dropping off a pie plate, or some other polite reason to bother me. But no. She gripped that clipboard like a sword, her lips pressed tight in the classic expression of a suburban tyrant ready for battle. I climbed out of my truck, exhausted and in no mood for this. My boots were still caked in manure, my neck burned from the sun, yet here I stood confronting this HOA intrusion. "Evening," I said, brushing sweat from my forehead. She didn't smile. "Bennett?" she asked, scanning her documents as though I were a criminal. "That's me. I'm here representing the Shadow Creek HOA board. We've had complaints about unauthorized commercial operations on your land, particularly illegal Airbnb rentals. As president, I must look into it." I stared at her. "Mom, this is a working farm. No one's vacationing beside chickens and cow manure." She ignored that completely. "We uphold community standards strictly. If your property lies within the shared zoning area, we hold the authority to examine it. You might not know this, but your cabin was included in the original Shadow Creek boundary map. That was pure nonsense, and she knew it. But she was determined to get inside. I had no intention of opening that gate. Before we continue further, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching this story from." Grace stood firm, her eyes flickering with disbelief that anyone would dare refuse her. Her mouth moved silently for a moment, as if processing the rejection. Refusing to cooperate, she finally grumbled, jotting notes on her clipboard, could lead to legal action. I stayed quiet and simply rested against the gatepost, observing her unravel. She wasn't accustomed to pushback. She expected frightened homeowners in tidy subdivisions who crumbled at her first demand. But this wasn't neat lawns and siding. This was my soil, my animals, my domain. She pulled out her phone and began photographing my property as if gathering evidence for a major investigation. "Unpermitted buildings," she announced loudly while capturing my woodshed. "Potential code breaches, animal welfare issues, safety risks." I blinked. "That's just a chicken coop," I replied. "And the only real hazard here is you." She pretended not to hear me and marched back to her SUV as though it had personally wronged her. Before speeding off, she shouted, "Prepare for a complete inspection. The whole board will be coming." It sounded like some kind of HOA task force. I wasn't shocked. The following day, my neighbor Frank down the road texted me, "Hey man, Grace is stirring things up at the meeting. Claims you're secretly operating an Airbnb and hiding unregistered dogs." I replied with a laughing emoji and returned to stacking hay bales. Still, I knew she wasn't making idle threats. Grace never did. She planned every move carefully and treated the HOA rulebook like her favorite novel. 3 days later, I had to head out of town for tractor parts up north. I hoped the situation would settle while I was away. I secured the cabin, put up fresh private property, and beware of dog signs on every gate, and filled all the feeders to the top. My 2 dogs, Bear and Grizzle, had free run of the land. They weren't aggressive killers, but if someone wasn't welcome, they made certain that person left with a clear message. What I never anticipated was Grace returning that very afternoon. She must have noticed my truck was gone and decided the coast was clear. No witnesses, no opposition, just her, that clipboard, and dreams of total control. The trouble was, she wasn't alone on my property. I was halfway upstate collecting parts when an alert buzzed on my phone. Motion sensors had activated at the east gate. Initially, I thought it might be a deer, or perhaps a bear chasing squirrels again. But when I pulled up the live camera feed and saw a familiar purple blouse forcing her way through my side fence, clipboard clutched like a symbol of authority, my blood began to boil. Grace had actually gone through with it. She had trespassed in broad daylight, as bold as could be. She slipped beneath a security camera and moved toward the cabin, talking to herself as if casting some kind of incantation. This woman didn't merely overlook the signs, she openly defied them. What she failed to understand, what her massive ego prevented her from even considering, was that the cameras weren't my only protection. Bear and Grizzle had been relaxing under the porch all morning. The instant she stepped onto the gravel path, their heads snapped up like twin alert systems. I watched in disbelief as she pushed through the second gate, the one displaying a large red "Do Not Enter Guard Dogs on Duty" sign. She either didn't see it or deliberately ignored it. Either way, she had made a serious error. Bear charged first. He's quick and stays silent until the final moment. Grace didn't notice him until he was just 5 feet away. She screamed and tried to retreat, but she stumbled over her own clipboard, waved her arms wildly like a clumsy character in a cartoon, and fell flat on her back in the dirt. Grizzle joined in right behind him, barking fiercely like a force unleashed. They didn't attack to kill. They're better trained than that, but they also weren't about to greet an intruder warmly. She received a bite on the leg, scratches on her arm, plenty of drool, and torn clothing before she managed to scramble away, shrieking as if her entire HOA world was crumbling. I called 911 right away, explained the full situation, and shared the live footage. They instructed me to remain on the line and sent help immediately. By the time I arrived back home, paramedics were already treating her at the edge of my property. She was ranting about rabies, lawsuits, and being attacked by dogs, even though she was the one who had broken in. The sheriff took me aside and simply said, "Don't worry. We saw the whole thing." Grace did precisely what someone like her would do. She filed charges, insisting I had released dangerous animals on a good neighbor simply doing her community duty. She hobbled into court on a crutch she didn't need, wrapped in bandages for minor scratches that had already healed, and carried that same arrogant clipboard in her oversized bag like a treasured relic. But what she lacked was any real jurisdiction, solid facts, or a legitimate legal claim. It turned out my land wasn't just beyond HOA reach. It had never been part of any annex development area. Her supposed community buffer zone was nothing more than an HOA invention. The judge reviewed the clear footage I provided. It showed Grace stepping over private property signs, disregarding the red guard dog warnings, crossing every legal line, and trespassing on camera. He didn't even allow her lawyer to finish speaking before throwing out her case. I could have sued her for trespassing, defamation, attempted fraud, emotional distress, and more. But I chose not to. I could have buried her in legal costs, yet I preferred something simpler, cleaner, and far more satisfying. So instead, I obtained a restraining order. Grace is now legally prohibited from coming within 300 feet of my property, my dogs, mailbox, fence, tractor, goats, and probably even my scarecrow. And because her trespass led to injuries resulting from her own reckless actions, the county fined her for violating boundaries and causing an unnecessary emergency response. The HOA, eager to protect its image, suspended her from the board for a time, but the news traveled quickly. Someone shared the video. It spread across Facebook, then TikTok, and even appeared in the local newsletter with the headline, "HOA Karen meets country justice. Peace returned to my farm. The gates stay locked. The cameras keep recording." And Grace learned the hard way what happens when you trespass where you don't belong. The end. Please like and subscribe for more HOA showdowns like this.